This is Nick Mancuso, and I'm going to be reading from my book called Never Play the Indian, a biographical work that I've been working on for a number of years. Never Play the Indian. In Hollywood, there are cowboys and Indians. Never play the Indian. Oh, a beauty, a beauty. I used to be a beauty, spoken to me by Greg Rozakis, actor, playwright, and star of Elia Kazan's America, America upon my arrival at a Hollywood party, circa 1977, on the life of an immigrant actor in Hollywood, 1975-2015. A lifetime on film. Acting has been the biggest nightmare of my life. It brought me the wrong women, false friends, thieves, and lunatics. It took all my attention. It made me sick, ruined my health, and sucked up all my energy. What little happiness I gained lasted minutes. Other than that, it's been a great run. Never play the Indian. Let the record show that this is not a book on showbiz, nor is it a bio per se. This is a story of spiritual and physical immigration. This book is about a splintered intellectual and moral war. It's a story of an immigrant man from the Mediterranean, from the deep south of Calabria, that region in the quick kick in the boot of Italy, which shook off its people the way a dog shakes off fleas, hurtling them into the world, trying to fit into a world he could not understand, and who became a kind of Hollywood star. I am, above all else, however, an immigrant, a stranger in a strange land, and I've spent my life trying to get home. I lived my whole life in a world that would continue to evade me, and one in which I tried to reintegrate. If only we could see ourselves as others see us, wrote the Roman poet Horace. That would be happiness indeed. The actor is a gypsy, and the road is his home. My home is the road. This is the story of one actor's life. All actors are Ulysses trying to find Ithaca. I am now in Ithaca, and yet in our current age all men are now Ulysses. And Ithaca is not to be found. Ithaca is everywhere and nowhere, as I am. What has happened to me in this course of life has happened to many, perhaps not in the same way, but it's happened. In the beginning of this tale, I sit across the street from the house I was born in, 1948, May 29th, in the small Calabrian town of Mammola, founded in 800 AD by, according to legend, Saint Nicodemus, a Byzantine monk. I'm writing this on an iPad in a modern age. Saint Nicodemus is nowhere to be found. His skull and bones are interred in a glass box surrounded by cherubim angels carved in gold leaf, above which his statue stands in living technicolor. Before there were movies, there were statues and paintings. Each statue, each painting tells a story and is a kind of film. Every year on the feast day of St. Nicodemus, his statue, bones and all, is paraded about the town, followed by the faithful and a brass band. His story is recounted, how he spoke to the animals, how he tamed wild beasts, how at the end of his pious life he invited his brothers, the ants, to consume his body. The animals are now gone. The mules, the chickens, the pigs, the herds of goats bringing fresh goat milk to your door. It is a new age. It is a new world order, and what has happened in the days of my youth is gone with the wind. Only memories now remain. From where I sit, the abandoned Palazzo Florimo is nearby, in total ruins, built in the 17th century, a ruin among ruins. There are abandoned ruins everywhere in this small town, which once housed 20,000 souls, and now less than 2,000. All are immigrants like myself, all flung to the four corners of the earth. Wherever you are, you're sure to know one of us. The patron saint of the town is Saint Nicodemus, a Byzantine monk, who arrived here from Tunisia, escaping the Saracen invasions which eventually occupied Spain and Sicily in 800 AD. It goes on today as 6 million Middle Eastern and African refugees wash up on the shores of Europe, not as conquerors, but as escapees of war zones. The same story, only intensified, as the world prepares for yet another world war. More wars, World War III, the war to end all wars, which will never end as long as there is greed, mendacity, and evil. As long as there are two types of men, givers and takers, killers and non-killers, men who care about others and men whose only concern is their own self-interest, as long as there are cowboys and Indians, cats and reptiles. In my current reverie and state of mind, and in my constant studies and research, I have become convinced that there are hidden pyramids in this region of Calabria, that some of the tight-peaked mountains are not mountains but covered pyramids, ancient ones, that at one time on this earth there was a golden age, a green age, in harmony with the universe, that energy was abundant as sunlight and the oceans, that food and water and air was plentiful. And this place that I was born in echoes a very distant past, outside the small official stories of the world. I'm here to recover for a while, to try to remember, to absorb the energy that launched me into a life of constant traveling and constant acting, into a life that made me restless and irritated sojourner on the turbulent seas of transformation in search of a home that could never again be found. Saint Nicodemus escaped Mount Athos in Greece during the time of the Saracen invasion to North Africa, and like the modern refugees escaping the current wars, took a small boat across the Mediterranean. He started a mystical order not unlike St. Francis, ate weeds and acorns, tamed wild animals, communicated with birds, all of nature, and at the end of his life, he invited the ants, his brothers, to consume his body. Since I'm named after him, perhaps I should do the same. But I have, like so many, lost the ability to communicate with the animals, the sun, the moon, the sea, the mountains, and the stars at night. As I write this, the church bells ring, as they have rung day and night for centuries. They're ringing at 2 a.m. Standing on the rooftop patio of my aunt's old house, I can see the flickering lights of the ancient cemetery. The sky is very black and filled with stars. A gentle, warm wind comes down from the mountains, fragrant with the smell of oregano and genestra. The spirits are alive. Nothing dies. We are merely transformed. My full and original name is Nicodemus, Nicodemo Antonio Massimo Mancuso. As I write this, a Moroccan street vendor asks me for money. A Romanian gypsy woman sells me t-shirts. The invasions continue to this day. The refugees, the immigrants. Millions have left their homes in Libya, Iraq, Syria, Morocco, Afghanistan, under a deadly rain of American firepower, missiles, drones. 1.5 million civilians killed, men, women, children, over 500,000 children. In the rubble, dead, bleeding. And now they sell t-shirts in Calabria, emptied in the millions after World War II, who were forced to travel to lands around the world, as these refugees are forced to leave their homes, their loved ones, their history, their culture. They are tagged terrorists, as we were tagged briganti, wops, mafiosi, DPs. It goes on. In America, the reigning rulers who caused this horrendous human catastrophe blame the terrorists. Always the same story. It's the briganti, as we Calabrians were known in the 1880s, tagged as such by the occupying armies of the North. The North invaded and destroyed the South, causing poverty, disease, oppression, and the suspension of all constitutional rights, forcing millions of southern Italians to flee their soil, and got away with it by convincing the world that they were saving us from poverty and oppression, when the South was in fact 4 times richer than the North, at a time when the kingdom of the two Sicilies was not only a cultural center, but was the third richest nation in Europe, with Naples surpassed only by London and Paris, and possessing the second most powerful mercantile fleet after the British. The entire invasion was in fact a cover-up, and paid by British and French corporate interests in order to gain control of the sulfur mines of Sicily. Why sulfur? Because sulfur was the main ingredient in the British and French armament arsenal, like petroleum is today. In a strange way, disruption and enforced exile forced me to become an actor. I firmly believe that acting is a kind of response by the organism to shock and to the trauma of dislocation, whether it be the many army brats who become actors or people like myself who are forced to act in order to regulate their identity in a strange and sometimes unforgiving world. Calabrians were tagged terrorists or briganti for trying to protect their homes, families, churches, and women. And I am tagged an actor for having spent a lifetime pretending to be other people. Memory is a strange thing. History is worse when it is recounted by liars and by the victors. It is, as Truman stated, bunk. What's wrong with mankind? When will history not repeat itself? When will we ever learn? And when will the insanity stop? When will we remember ourselves? Unsettledness and constant escape is the history of my birth country, the former kingdom of the two Sicilies, now known as Italy. There is no Italy. Italy is an enforced idea, not a reality. Millions became immigrants and shot out around the world. America, Canada, Argentina, Australia, everywhere but here. And now this land is filling up with Romanians, Moroccans, Syrians, Pakistani, even Chinese. And the new world order, which pretends to unify the people of the earth under mountains and rules and laws and obligations that benefit only the super rich, under the banner of doing it all for you, as the motto goes. We do it all for you because you're worth it. And hey, you're loving it. The twisted sickness returns and spreads. Perhaps it never left. In some ways, I never grew up. Actors are perpetual children. There is nothing warm or cuddly about life or this story, the story of one man. This is a kind of interior war journal, written by a soldier, scarred and bleeding from every part of his being, someone barely alive. So if you're reading this book, looking at how to become an actor or even that ineffable being called a star, please stop now and find a fairy tale somewhere else. There are plenty of such books. The world is full of them. This isn't one of them. I've been blessed in so many ways and have had the most extraordinary good and bad luck. But then luck is self-generated, and bad luck might be the best luck of all. For while the entertainment shows on TV blare the ersatz glamour of the red carpet in truth, for the grand majority of the we in the business, in this, the second oldest profession, it is, as the Brits would say, the bloody opposite. And for every evening-clad beauty or tuxedoed handsome hunk walking the red carpeted walk to the paradise alley of palace of money and glory and fame, around them the stage is littered with thousands, nay, tens and hundreds of thousands of bodies destroyed, humiliated, bombed beyond repair, and defeated. Failure and rejection is in the current refrain of the actor's life. For the most part, interrupted by lightning and thunder shows when the skies open up and a brilliant sun shoots its rays into the world. Film is light and sound. Actors are transformers of communicative energy, spark plugs. This is the reality. In the meantime, I sit and I think and I remember and I sip my excellent cappuccino in this espresso bar. I'm here for a few weeks to recover from congestive heart failure. I'm here to touch base before I try first base again. I still have family here. If I die, I want to die between second and third base, trying to steal home. There's nothing interesting about home base other than rocketing out. You stand there on stage, alone, and you smile. Around you are the remnants of the battle of life. Your life. You smile, pause, and you bow, and the audience of eternity applauds. Exeunt. Stage left. Blackout. Showbiz, for the most part, is a happy and sad business, a paradox, but there's truly nothing like it. As the old Broadway adage goes, there's no business like show business, like no business I know. It's a most extraordinary coagulation of the circus, the theater, the novel, the cartoon, the ballet russe, a wrestling match, a mental ward, a ski jump off a short pier, and skydiving without a parachute. The mask of tragedy wrapped within the mask of comedy. On stage, the actor. The audience laughs at his utter absurdity. The first row, behind the second row, now weeps as the third row laughs. And the fourth cries uproariously, and so on until the end of time. Friday night at the movies, Saturday night at the movies, watching TV, what's on tonight? Anything good? All actors are children, playing with adult rules. Nothing is real, as the Beatles sang on their White Album. Nothing to get hung about. There's nothing to get hung about, certainly not showbiz. The other night, a fan from Belgium came up to me, quivering, wanting to have a photo taken with him. Certainly. I've never understood actors who refuse. But then it must get sickeningly tiresome if you're truly a big star, say a Tom Cruise or Nicole Kidman, a Brad Pitt, a Sylvester Stallone, a Pacino, a Nicholson, a Brando, a Redford, etc. The year is 1978. I'm doing a love scene with Raquel Welch. I'm in Billings, Montana, playing a character named Horse's Ghost, an Indian. It's an Indian tale dating back to the Battle of Little Bighorn. It's based on a true story, recounted to the writer by an old Indian woman of the 1880s who was there at the Battle of Little Bighorn and the end of the Indian nations. Raquel, myself, Bradford Dillman are for the most part the only non-Indians. Raquel is playing Walks Far Woman. The film is called The Legend of Walks Far Woman. Tonight, in the story, it's our wedding night, and it's based on a true story of the Old West. The crew, the director, Mel Damsky, and crew are crammed into a teepee not far from the area known as Little Bighorn. Soon we are to reenact the famous battle. My character, this Indian warrior, is injured at the battle with a head wound and loses his mind. In the story, he's murdered by his wife, the woman to whom tonight he will make love to for the first time. Raquel and I are acting our love story, though we have become friends on the shoot. I teach her yoga. We're in an awful little town, and there's a guard at the door, at her door. On Sundays, walking the streets, the drunk pickup truck locals hoot at me because I look like an Indian. Raquel was, a few years before, America's biggest sex symbol, in a famous poster from her first film, 1 Million BC. This is my second film in Hollywood, after having starred in Nightwing for Columbia Pictures, where I played the Indian Duran. During the shoot in New Mexico, I'm asked by one of the Indian chiefs what tribe I come from. Sicilian, I reply. I am of the Sicilian persuasion. I am of the Calabro-Sicilian tribe. Several years before, I'm on stage, acting my brains out at Stratford, Ontario, with Maggie Smith, playing one of the Shakespearean lovers, Bassanio in Merchant of Venice, Lysander in Midsummer Night's Dream, with Jessica Tandy as Titania, Hume Cronin as Bottom, the elegant Jeremy Brett as Oberon, later to reenact Sherlock Holmes. I've been hired by the enfant terrible of the British stage, Robin Phillips, who turned down the artistic directorship of the National Theatre of England, offered to him by Laurence Olivier. He has instead taken the chief position of Stratford, and he hires me. I'm about to become a star, and haven't a clue. I'm a pretty boy with startling Mediterranean good looks, the kind of looks that got Rudolph Valentino into such big trouble, and which killed him at 31 from a perforated ulcer, the result of stress, of taking on the capitalist bosses of the studios, believing in art and beauty and mysticism and magic instead of money and power and property and prestige. The studio bosses went after him like ravenous wolves and tore him apart. He countersued and traveled all over the good old USA, putting on tango dances, shows to packed houses. The first superstar along with Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford. The founders of the Hollywood star system. The audiences loved him. The stress killed him. How dare you believe in art with a capital A? As I say, I'm about to enter the fray, but like Valentino, I have one added strike against me. I have talent, I can act. And one other, a super serious belief that art is important, that the actor represents that which is good and strong and free. I get picked out of the crowd because Walter Kerr of the New York Times has stated that my work as Bassanio in Merchant had laid to rest the curse on that role for over 250 years. I had cracked it, the mystery code that is in all of Shakespeare, but it was no accident. I worked like a dog, on my own, in the rehearsal hall. One day Maggie Smith came in while I rehearsed. "What are you doing, my darling?" she asked quizzically. I showed her the text I was working on. "I can't crack this, Maggie." She stared long and hard at the lines, 5 minutes at least of utter concentration, after which she flippantly stated, "Oh, that's hard," and walked away. A few days later, I did crack it, the code, by turning the phonemes, units of sound, and even the morphemes, units of meaning, into physical objects, chairs, pillows, watches, cups, ashtrays. In those days we smoked, bottles in those days we drank, and scattering them about the room and walking over them as I pronounced the vowels, consonants, diphthongs, until finally I understood. Shakespeare wrote without punctuation. The punctuation was added after by scholars based on how certain great British actors had interpreted it. I realized that Shakespeare had given the actor plenty of breathing room, both physically and psychically. Shakespeare is the actor's gift. It's as easy as breathing, as straightforward as action is as close to our heartbeat. I cracked it, and after weeks of work on my own, despairing of ever breaking the code, I showed it to Jeremy Brett. "Darling," Jeremy said, "that's what Larry Olivier told me." Somehow this immigrant wop who spoke English as a second language had figured it out. The Canadian critics, in their racist undertow, referred to my performance of Bassanio, a Venetian gentleman, as a, quote, refugee from The Godfather. After Walter Kerr's review, they came back perplexed to rewatch my performance, trying to understand what they had missed, that the greatest living critic in the English-speaking language had seen. After all, Indians can't be cowboys. As you are perceived, so you become. The Heisenberg principle holds true. What you perceive, you change the moment you perceive it. I have one particular memory from one which I'm ashamed of, and then one in which I am proud of. One drunken night at a cast party in Stratford, in a particularly foul state of mind, so foul and fair a day I have not seen, a Scottish play, I poured beer on the head of Jeremy Brett from the third-floor landing of the old Victorian house. I couldn't help myself. I upset Jeremy, a truly gentle soul, and my boorish behavior made him cry. I apologize to you, Jeremy. I was an asshole. One memory, however, that I am proud of is this. I would go to the Avon Theater bar and pretend to be an American tourist to get raw-fed responses from some of the public who would never recognize me in my downtrodden hippie clothing. Did you see so-and-so in such and such a show? I would ask someone nursing a beer. That actor, I would say to this guy from Cleveland or Detroit up on a theater visit, I couldn't understand him. He blurred his words. He had flubbery lips. Oh, I understood him perfectly well, the tourist might reply, and so I knew my constant work on clear diction and enunciation was working well. Darling, your D's and your T's, Robin would say. The only acting note Robin Phillips ever gave me, other than, oh, it's hard. Isn't it bloody hard? Acting. To do it well is bloody hard. That's the central difference between the English and the American acting systems. It's not enough to do perfect D's and T's. The Americans dance all around it, dodging bullets, whistling and ducking. The Brits simply muttered, "Get on with it, darling," with perfect D's and T's. Meanwhile, Brando just muttered. Acting no longer had anything to do with diction, not film acting. Leave that to the diction teachers. Acting was being. The famous aphoristic tale of Sir Laurence Olivier telling Dustin Hoffman to just act, after Hoffman ran all night to prepare himself for the scene. Do what I do, dear boy. Just act. Could no longer hold water. The modern cinema actor, to truly catch the conscience of the king, has to hold a mirror not just to nature, but to himself. Hard. Bloody hard. It was transformative work. In my film, Ticket to Heaven, shot in Toronto, Canada in 1981, I underwent my first major transformation, impacting my body, mind, and heart. Because of this, I was submitted for an Oscar nomination and a Golden Globe by MGM UA. Kevin Thomas of the LA Times, among many other critics, called my performance one of the best of the year, if not the decade. The best way to learn how to swim is to almost drown. One night at Stratford, a great Canadian actor later to become head of the festival, Richard Manette, overheard me doing my little ploy and realized what I was doing. He turned green and left. But then, what did you expect from a man willing to pretend to be British for 6 months and invent an invented persona, an Englishman so well that people believed that I was, in fact, British? They never got to know the truth. In film acting, there is a self-imposed psychic trap in which the unreal can manifest out of the blue and become reality, where thought and action are mixed up together and commingled and then inhaled, where nothing is as it appears to be. a Hollywood of the mind, and a magical landscape where the laws of Newtonian Einsteinian physics no longer apply, where everything can be turned upside down at a moment's notice, where wishing upon a star makes no difference to who you are, but can make all the difference in the world. What is time? What is space? Who are we? Who am I? In a sense, film answers all that in a kind of invented paradise or invented hell. The what, where, when is answered in the master or the long shot, the how in the mid shot of what is used to be called the cowboy, and the why in the close-up. The year is 1968. I'm working on one of my first TV shows with John Candy in Toronto, Canada. John is a great guy, and already a master comedian. I'm being super serious, and John is being super unserious. John is a natural clown, the glass troublemaker full of mischief and pretending to play a tough guy. We're playing punks in a very bad TV series starring Sam Groom, police surgeon. Most everyone on the set is either drunk or stoned or incompetent. I haven't a clue what a camera is, but I'm not afraid of it. Everyone is too busy to answer my questions. As a stage actor, I block my scenes and I check my props. Where do I look? I ask the snarling first AD. Where do you want to look? Why, you look at the camera, stupid. Of course, the opposite is true. The actor never looks at the camera. Later in the scene, they put me in the back of a truck filled with empty cardboard boxes, the supposed haul from a warehouse we've just robbed. It has a sliding metal door, unattached and unsecured. The AD puts me right beneath it, so when the truck wheels out, it will slide and hit me in the head. I have nothing to hold on to. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. What do you want? The snarling AD states. Sir, if the truck wheels out, the door will hit me on the head. That truck is just gonna idle out. The truck, of course, wheels away, and the metal door hits me on the head, causing me to fall out of the truck and hitting both knees on the concrete. I limp for a year. The doctors want to operate on my knees. I reject the operation and I study acupuncture and moxibustion and yoga. I heal myself. That was my first official TV show. I still have a scar on my left knee 46 years later. I had been marked. A few years later, while playing the role of Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar Named Desire at the Centaur Theatre in Montreal, my left arm is exploded open during a drunk scene on a very large, nasty nail. I almost drowned while filming Motherlode with Charlton Heston in a plane crash that was never supposed to actually crash. While playing De Bourget in a Canadian film shooting in Prague, I fight with 35-pound broadswords and incur a right shoulder injury which lasts for years. At 16, in my second play as Mancuso at Bloor Collegiate Institute, during the sword fight, my right middle finger is sliced open. I can still see the scar as I write. A drunk Canadian director in Vancouver is screaming at me while filming a mediocre cop drama. He wants me to stand close by to an exploding car while the car explodes. I refuse, knowing the incompetence of the special effects coordinator. He's already almost blinded some stuntmen running through a hail of bullets. The director is apoplectic. I switch to what I know is a safe position. The explosion goes off and a piece of metal flies through the air in the area the director wanted me to stand on. A year later, in a similar stunt, a crew member is decapitated. It's all kept very hush-hush. After all, the Americans have brought in $3.5 billion into film production. It's worked. I'm now in Atlanta, Georgia. The year is 1977. I've been cast in one of the last plays written by the great Tennessee Williams. The studio, Columbia Pictures, has just offered me the lead role in their biggest picture of the year entitled Nightwing. I play an Indian in it. I tell the producer Marty Ransahoff that I will only play the part if I get the opportunity to go to New Mexico and spend some time there with them in order to absorb the atmosphere and spirit of the place, its veracity. The book by Martin Cruz Smith is a New York Times bestseller and ecological fantasy about the revenge of an Indian shaman who avenges himself on the white man by spreading bubonic plague through attacking vampire bats. It will star myself as the invented Indian tribe, the Muskie, as Sheriff Duran Smith, the hero of the piece. The mad scientist is played by British actor David Warner, who did Morgan in the 60s, a British classic, Catherine Harold, who never really did much of anything again, and the great American character actor Strother Martin, famous for his line opposite Paul Newman in HUD, "What we got here is a failure to communicate." "You want to go live with the fucking Indians? Go live with the fucking Indians," Marty says to me. "Make sure you don't get a bunch of arrows up your ass." The art of acting is a mercurial attempt at a mental-physical kind of reintegration into the nature of things in the world. Yes, it's true. Leonard Cohen, the legendary Canadian singer, songwriter, poet, and novelist, put it best to me in rehearsal in Montreal in a little-known film he wrote. "I see what you're doing, Nick. You take it all apart, the text, and put it back together again." Wiser words were never spoken about the actor's art. The actor chews up and swallows the writer's work and then reintegrates it into his own body. He digests and integrates the world invented by a human mind. It's a way of walking and waking up into the world. The true actor walks into his part and never stops. It's an awakening which demands tremendous will, a triumph of the will, as expressed by the demon master showman Adolf Hitler, who stated it. The actor's enemy is the desire to sleep and to avoid it if he can at all, help it. If he gets safe and comfortable and yes, rich, his art is seriously compromised and determined. Hitler knew that. For the most part, audience wants its favorite tunes. The business guys know that. And the general relationship with the artist and his team is one of hidden jealous rage. As Charlton Heston once said to me while I starred in his film Motherlode, the problem with showbiz is that it's an art disguised as a business, and a business disguised as an art. That's when it works. When it doesn't work, which is, in most cases, it is neither. The extraordinary thing is that no matter how bad a film is, it engages the audience. Unlike a book, it can't be put down. And like life, it continues to roll until it runs out.